So I mean, we were already talking about a lot of topics today, but still some questions left as usual.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I know we didn't discuss it before, but I would love to know a bit more about your background. Like, what did you do in your life? Like, how come you studied psychology? Like, what was the path you were going until now? Because I know some bits and pieces, but not the whole story, or not the main part of it. That's a big one, right?
Yeah. That's a hard question, actually, because I spent a long time thinking, you know, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. Maybe I do this, maybe I do that. One day I'll find out what I really do.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really did. Turns out I do a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and almost everything, it turned out to be a happy accident. So I didn't plan a career. I just did something that was interesting. And then if I wasn't interested, I would do something else. I would just say, oh yes, I'll do that.
So what were the interesting things you did?
Okay.
I like that question because you're not prepared, and usually, you know, you have so many things to say, and now I see it a different way. I like it.
So, one of the interesting things I did, which is kind of the beginning, was I hypnotized somebody accidentally. It was meant to be a party piece, a party trick, where you take in English we say take the piss or take the mickey out of somebody. It means you make a fool of someone. So you set it up, you say, I'm going to hypnotize you. Do exactly what I do. And this guy lost all muscle tonus. It's like he'd gone, you know. And I hadn't even started the trick bit, right? And I said, oh, forget it. Because I thought he already knew this trick, so he was pretending to be hypnotized so that he wouldn't get to paint his face black, which was how the trick was going to go. But in fact, he really was hypnotized. And as I later discovered, that was a really stupid thing to say, because it was a direct command, forget. And then I said it, which is a non-specific reference. So he forgot everything. Everything. So his experience was he was just having fun with his friends. It was after dinner. He volunteers to be hypnotized, and then everything disappears. He was just consciousness in the void. Which, if that happened to you right now, might be kind of scary, right? And he looked scared. And I didn't know what was going on. But a friend of mine, who's a sensible woman, she just gave him a hug and said, hey, you're right. And he was all right, he came out of it, he was fine. I felt like a complete idiot because I didn't know what I'd done. A few years later, I met a hypnotherapist at a party, and I said, hey, what did I do? Right? So, to cut a long story short, I trained as a hypnotherapist, and then I worked as a hypnotherapist. And I was at a conference in America, somewhere in Arizona, of hypnotherapists and therapists and psychotherapists. And everyone was giving these interesting papers and talks and seminars. And I realized that we were all talking about human beings, but we didn't really have an agreed definition of human being. And I thought, well, I'll sort that out, I thought. And I went back to university, and I ended up doing a PhD, the title of which ended up as Meaning and Narrative, a phenomenological inquiry with reference to psychotherapy. It was basically about the place of meaning in human being. So by this point, I'd been I'd been a psychotherapist and a philosopher. During all of that, I also got interested in storytelling. I'd done a lot of acting when I was a student. I liked acting. Sorry.
How do you become a storyteller?
Well, what happened to me was one of the strands of training in psychotherapy was concerning storytelling, and they had this notion that you could tell isomorphic stories. So you have a client who's got long blonde hair and blue eyes, and she's troubled, and you say, "You just relax and let me tell you a story. There was a princess once who had long blonde hair and blue eyes." And I thought that was just so hokey, such crap, you know. But I happened to have met somebody who was a traditional storyteller and was doing workshops. So I went along to the workshop, and I was like, yes, this is such fun. Like, I really loved performing again. I hadn't done any since university, really. And so my friend was teaching traditional storytelling, which is kind of weird because traditional storytelling was basically a craft handed down from person to person to person to person, but it got killed off by the impact of literacy. So she was kind of part of the revival movement, bringing storytelling back to life. And like a lot of other things, you learn by practicing. So I practiced a lot, and I ended up having this career for a while as a storyteller and promoter of storytelling. So I was a psychotherapist, a philosopher, and a promoter of storytelling. And a friend of mine asked me to help him out. He was a stage hypnotist. A, help him become a stage hypnotist, and B, help him out by writing some scripts and so forth. So I came out of the library 7 years later with a PhD, doing a bit of storytelling, doing some psychotherapy, and being pretty much totally broke. My friend I'd helped with the scripts, he was already a millionaire. And I was like, oh, damn. And then another friend who I'd been like having lunch with for a long time, he invited me to join him in a market research business. So I did that, and then we set up our own business, and that was a lot of fun. So we did a lot of market research. So now I'm a psychotherapist, a storyteller, a philosopher, and a market researcher. And I've been writing some books during this time, and my agent said, would I write a book about negotiating? So I said, sure. And then I did a load of research, and I started doing some negotiation consultancy. And so now I'm a storyteller, a philosopher, a psychotherapist, a market researcher, an author, and a negotiation consultant. And I thought, I wonder what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I thought, this is it. This is it. You know?
How old were you at that time?
Oh, I don't know, 30-something, 40 maybe, I don't know. Yeah. But actually, you know, I was doing the same thing, just with a different hat on. Mm-hmm. It's all about communication, understanding meaning, talking to people, finding where the energy is, what's really going on, where's the potential. But one of the weird things about modernity is we cut up life into these different sections, you know, the academic bit, the business bit. And within academia, there are all the other little sections, you know, history, geography, economics, psychology, politics, whatever. But it's all the same stuff. And so I do the same stuff, but with lots of different hats on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you think about the whole process of what you did in life, was there a plan?
No.
You never had an actual plan? I want to get there. There was.
Well, there are things I enjoy. I really enjoy meeting people, talking to people, learning from people, and I enjoy like performing, storytelling, acting. So there's like, even when we were doing market research, that combined two things. I was doing qualitative market research, not quantitative. So qual is basically talking to people and finding out in depth what they think and feel. And we would do that with one-to-one interviews, which would be something like this. And we'd do it in big workshops. We'd have a lot of people moving around the room, demonstrating, showing stuff to us. And that was a lot of fun. We did some great work there. So I kind of followed the stuff that was interesting to me, where I felt energized. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and pretty much the money kind of varied. So when I was telling stories, I might get paid like £50 or something. But then I do market research, I get paid £500. So the money depends on the context, but everything valuable is worth paying for. And if you're doing something that really interests you, you're likely to do it with more enthusiasm than someone who's just doing it for the money. So one of the books I haven't written yet is called Find Something You Like Doing and Get Someone to Pay You to Do It. And if, in retrospect, I would say that's what I've been doing. But it took me at least 15 years to find enough stuff that I like doing that other people would be willing to pay for.
Is there a shortcut?
Not unless you're really lucky. Maybe. If you really find something that you utterly adore and you're good at it and people will pay you, yeah, good luck to you. But you're a very fortunate person.
So what is your work right now? What are you doing right now?
Right now, I'm working with you to develop this training program. And I'm teaching a little bit in one of the local universities. And I'm struggling to write another book.
So the book you were talking about before is the book you have in mind?
Yeah. It's a very paradoxical book. There are lots of levels of that. One is that a central part of my understanding is that, and there's a lot of philosophy behind this and history, but essentially literacy distorted the way that we think. Now, there are a lot of benefits to that, but what we're not aware of so much are the disbenefits. Now, if I'm writing about the disbenefits of literacy, that's already weird, right? Because writing is what you do.
It's literacy,
it's
right?
literacy, right? So writing about the problems of writing is already a problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And there was another thing which I've completely forgotten because I was explaining that point. But there are many other issues, really.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about philosophy. Do you have your own philosophy in life, for your work?
Yeah. I call it really original philosophy because the original meaning of philosophy, so it's a Greek word, philosophos. Philo is love of, sophos is wisdom. So Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. Sophos, wisdom. So the original meaning of philosophy is the love of wisdom. Now, if you look up philosophy in a textbook now or go online and do it, you'll find that it describes the academic practice or the academic discipline of philosophy. And interestingly, the word wisdom doesn't turn up. They'll talk about epistemology, they'll talk about metaphysics, they'll talk about logic or aesthetics, but wisdom has kind of drifted away. But I'm very interested in wisdom. And it is in fact possibly the quality that we are most lacking collectively now, the quality we most need collectively now, and the quality which most of the time is ignored collectively now.
Why do we ignore? Why do we ignore wisdom?
Because we've kind of got hypnotized by science. We imagine that if we have enough data and a decent algorithm, then we'll know the right policy and we can do things correctly. And all of those assumptions are inadequate. They're really good. So it's a bit like imagining that engineering is a really, really good way to build a bridge, which in fact it is. You use your understanding of physics to assess the various types of strength that you need in the various materials and to predict them. And you can use basically physics and maths to tell you what you need to do in order to build a robust bridge. It's really excellent. You can't really use physics and maths to tell you how to chat up a girl, or how to have a good relationship, or how to build a business. They're just not good for that. But they're really good for building bridges. And it's as though we think that everything in the world really, deep down, is engineering. If only we could get a little bit better with the maths and the physics, we'd nail everything. And that's just not true.
Sad.
Sad. But yeah.
Maybe not, but could be easier, right? If you rely on numbers and if you rely on data, and you kind of have a way to go, or it feels like that.
That's the seduction of it, isn't it? You just imagine, oh, just a little bit more of this and it'll work. But you're just using the wrong stuff. There are other qualities of being human that we need to develop in order to run our lives better. So thinking of wisdom, right? Now wisdom's a noun, wisdom, the quality of doing the right thing, if you like. But that's a kind of fiction of language, because wisdom isn't something I can put in my pocket or pull out of my pocket. It's not even a thing at all. It's what we call a nominalization. It's a name for a process. And even more than that, it's not even a process I can do. I can't do a couple of minutes of wisdom. Hang on a second, I'm just going to do a little bit of wisdom and I'll be back with you in a second. No. Wisdom is a quality that supervenes on something else. Now, supervenes means sits above, right, or is a way of describing. Just like happiness. I can't do 2 minutes of happiness, or even 3, right? Happiness is a quality that supervenes on me doing something else. So I'm having a good conversation, or I'm playing a game, or I'm walking down the road, and I'm happy, right? I can't do happy, I go for a walk. And if I'm fortunate, then I'm happy. Wisdom's like that. Wisdom is a way of describing an event. And what is that event? Really, it's doing the most appropriate thing in this context, in every context.
How do we know?
We don't. And you can't prove it. You can look back and you go, that was pretty wise. But maybe 10 years later you think, oh, I'm not as wise as I thought. Right? So you can't prove it and you can't know it.
So life is like gambling.
Life, there are always risks, and there is no proof. It's more complicated than gambling, but it includes gambling. Yeah.
So when I go to the casino, I can practice.
No, I did some research on gambling for a long time ago, which was fascinating, and I thought, well, I'd never been to a casino, so I've got to sort this out, right? So I took £100. Which was noticeable in those days, right? And I said, well, I'm going to go to the casino. I was in Blackpool, right? So there were casinos. And I thought, I'm going to gamble this money and see what's going on. And I walked in, and the first thing I saw was the roulette table, right? So there's a big, like an arch, right? Like this. There's red and black, and there's numbers 1 to 36, right? And what happens is people put tokens on various numbers, or red or black or even or uneven, or on the lines or whatever, and the guy spins the wheel and this little ball goes round and then it stops in one of the numbers, and then he rakes in all the chips and keeps them, and then they do it again. And I'm like, really? They all lost. He keeps the money. Okay, very occasionally he'd put a few chips out, but basically most of the money on the table he just took it. And that's not gambling, that's basically losing. So I thought, well, I can't do that.
It's frustrating, right?
Yeah, I didn't really understand it, but basically it was, this is how to lose money. So I thought, well, that's crazy, I'm not going to do that. So then I went over to where they were playing blackjack, pontoon, 21. And I used to play that with my dad, so I knew how to play it. But man, they were playing so fast. It was like, so like, oh. And I was like, I knew if I would be like, oh, I don't know. No, they weren't going to let me play that. So then I thought, well, okay, I'll just do the slot machines, right? Because I can't do any of these things on the table. And I went over to those slot machines, and there were people playing these slot machines, and man, they were so complicated. There were so many flashing lights and buttons, and it didn't have a little instruction book. There was nothing that said, and I thought, I can't even do this. And I walked out of the casino with my £100 because I didn't know how to spend it.
Okay, that's good. So we didn't lose anything.
No.
So.
But so I was in Blackpool to do this research, and we'd recruited people who were moderate to heavy gamblers, who did gamble a lot, right? On the horses, mostly on the horses and football, right? In the bookies, not in the casino. And there was one guy, and he was actually a bit drunk when he turned up, but he was wonderful. He said, the thing about gambling, he says, you've got to know your limits. I know my limits. Thing is, when I reach them, I don't know where to stop.
That's a nice way to put it.
He was spot on.
That's great. I will keep that. I want to ask you another question. During the week I always collect some questions when I meet you. It's like, okay, when you and me meet again, I want to ask him this.
Okay.
So I was thinking, I was watching the videos and listening to the podcast we recorded so far, and I found out that my English is not as good as I thought it is.
Me too.
When I'm talking and do small talk, I say it's good enough, but for like kind of deeper conversations, I'm lacking vocabulary, so I cannot express myself, which doesn't feel good for me. So, how can I learn English? How can I improve my English? Do you have any idea?
Well, I think you are improving your English. I think use it, do it. Be willing to try and make mistakes. Be willing to try, comma, and to make mistakes, comma. Mm-hmm. You see, so I have to correct myself too.
How do we learn?
Oh, whoa. Let me just
finish the first one.
I'm just trying to remember, there was a wonderful sentence of Wittgenstein, which says something like philosophy. I'll have to look it up for you. Something like philosophy is a battle. No, I'm going to have to do it justice, so I'll have to look this up and tell you later, or we can paste it in, but it's just a wonderful quote about language. So how do we learn language? Really, we learn it by talking and listening and just doing it more and more. So how do you learn better? By listening better. So if you want to improve your accent, you need to really prick up your ears and really try hard and listen carefully. So both of us, we're learning to a greater or lesser extent Vietnamese now, which is a nightmare language if you're European, because it's tonal. So we have to hear the difference between ban and ban and ban and ban, right? And we also discover, as we try to do those tones, we discover, damn it, English is tonal too. We just didn't notice, right? So English is tonal across the sentence, whereas Vietnamese is tonal in terms of one word. So if I say to you, coffee, you know what that means. It's, would you like a coffee, right? And we've conveyed that because I went up, I went coffee, right? But for example, in Vietnamese, ban doesn't mean the same as ban, right? Ban means selling or sell, and ban means table. So ban, that's sell table, right?
In bang.
Bang. So friend is bang. So bang, bang, ban, ban. My friend is busy selling tables, but it's ban, 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 ban when you write it down, okay, with the diacritical marks. So without getting lost in Vietnamese, in order for me to learn Vietnamese, which I have to say is very difficult, and I struggle, I have to really try to listen harder and harder. And can I hear the difference between ban and ban in the middle of a conversation? And the answer is it's really tough, because my ears were not prepared for that. But if you want to improve your English, you just need to try and say things and listen hard and talk a lot and not worry that occasionally you say things that are not perfect. That's true of all of us, English speakers and otherwise. And accept, hey, you're going to be learning to speak English forever. I am actually. I just realized the other day that I misspelled and mispronounced the word maleficent. So maleficent means doing bad things. And I always thought it was maleficient. I was putting an extra I in. I was wrong. Mm-hmm. I was just wrong, right? So we all learn.
Mm-hmm. So I just try.
Keep going.
Keep going and make mistakes.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Listen.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there something you want to tell me? I ask the other way around, because sometimes I have questions, but maybe you have something on your mind as well which you would like to share with us.
Yeah, I have, but it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's like I was saying, it's like I feel like I'm standing under this waterfall. For years and years, decades, mm-hmm. right? I felt I really didn't have anything to say. So I wrote these books with Paul, and he would come along with a title like, I Can Make You Sleep.
Who's Paul?
Paul McKenna. So I've worked with him for 20, 30 years. He's the guy, he was originally a disc jockey who got interested in hypnosis and wanted to be a stage hypnotist. So when I was a hypnotherapist, I helped him with that. And then later on I helped him with books. He's a really great guy, really interesting, really astute, picking out the key points of changing your life and so forth. But he's not a great wordsmith. He's not a writer. So we would work together, and we wrote a book together, and then I helped him with a bunch of other books that are under his name. Why did I mention him? What was your question?
I had no question.
Is that the thing I wanted to tell you? Yes, that's right.
What
I felt I was really happy to work with him because I didn't really have anything to say, and he had things to say. It's like, I can make you sleep, I can mend your broken heart. We wrote a book about influence, power, and charisma. We wrote a lot of good books that I'm enjoying. What was good about them was that you know what they're about. I Can Make You Sleep. Well, what do you think you can get, right? It's the best-selling sleep book in America, and I mean, people would, when that came out, he was driving down the road or walking down the road, people would like shout at him, "I can sleep!" They were just so happy at last, because it's very, very functional. And then over the last few years, I realized that all this work I'd done in philosophy, in psychotherapy, and in business kind of came together, and I thought, oh my goodness. There's something I understand now, which I didn't before. I understood bits of it, but it's all kind of come together. And I go, goodness me. There's something, there's like an invisible mountain, right, in here. It's here and it's everywhere. And actually we're all climbing it. And when you know about that mountain, you can see, oh my goodness, she's climbing it, he's climbing it, they're climbing it. And everybody is climbing. When they get to a certain level, often they will leave a little signpost behind, a little bit of insight. And the higher you climb up the mountain, the more you can see, well, I do understand. I can see down, I understand all of that stuff down there, right? I also know there's a whole lot more up here I really don't understand, right? But also you begin to realize we all climb the mountain our own way. Like I've got a little kid, I've got 2 kids actually, and I would really love to just dump all my understanding on them. Go, here, look, don't worry all the terrible mistakes I made, you don't have to do them. here's the answer, boom, right? I can't do it. The difficulty is not that the answers aren't out there. We're not lacking knowledge. Everything you could possibly need to know has already been written. The challenge we all face is that we find it really hard to understand. And often we think we understand when we understand just the top tiny 2%. We go, oh, I know what that is. We don't realize how much more there is. So how do you find that out? In my case, just by making a shed load of terrible and painful and embarrassing mistakes, and you go, oh wow, that's awful. Okay?
So you're a bit older than me, right?
For sure.
Does it get less, the mistakes you do? Is that like a curve? You make a lot of painful mistakes when you're really young, and then like the older you get, you know how that works, so it's less painful, or it's doesn't happen that often when you look back. Or is it up and down like a roller coaster? Sometimes more mistakes and more pain, sometimes less mistakes and less pain.
Well, it'd be nice to think it gets better, right? But that's
already a frustrating answer.
I know it is. The point is you can't tell. I just don't know, right? I just don't know. The Greeks talk about hubris. So it's interesting that that's an archetype. Hubris is the pride you have that comes before a fall. Ha! Now I'm so old, I know how to do this. I've made all my mistakes, I'm never going to make another one. Oh! Okay? So, here I can tell you, here's a mistake I made that still hurts, okay? I can't remember. Let's say 20 years ago, or more. I went to an art exhibition, and there was a wonderful artist there. And I thought, I'll ask her to do a portrait of my dad. So me and my brothers, we all chipped in, and this lady came and she painted a portrait of my dad. And he got on with her really well. She's a lovely woman. And she painted this portrait. And I was busy running around London, making money, and every now and then I'd go and see my folks. And she did, half a dozen sittings with my dad. And then my dad called me up one day and said, could you go and see the portrait, the artist has asked you to go and have a look at it. And there's something a bit wrong with the mouth. I went, okay. So I went to meet the artist in her studio, and she showed me this portrait of my dad. And I just looked at it a bit. And then I realized it was kind of a little bit impressionistic, right? It wasn't like a perfect, like a photo. But she'd caught his look, right? The way he looks, like this one. And then a moment later I'd see another one. It was like she'd caught these expressions of him. It was like for a moment I saw my dad looking at me with his kind of look, and then his other look, and so on. And the mouth was a bit weird. It was just like, the whole thing was a bit impressionist, but the mouth was a bit, And the artist said, well, what do you think? I think it's great. I said, it's very good. And my dad said he didn't, he thought the mouth needed tidying up. And she went, oh, okay. And so she tidied up the mouth, and she took it to my dad. And it's a portrait of my dad. And all those beautiful expressions have gone. It's a picture of him. It's a picture of him. But when she tidied it up to make it more like a proper portrait, all of those brilliant moments that she caught disappeared. And the mistake I made was I didn't ask her. I didn't say, look, I've just seen my dad looking at me through this picture. Will that go if you do this? I was a dutiful son. My dad said, fix the mouth. So I thought, oh, here's the message. I didn't care. Right? I should have cared. I'd organised this bloody thing. I knew she was a great artist. And I didn't say, please tell me what's really going on here, because I can see something amazing. I just thought, well, I've seen something amazing, and fixed the mouth. So it's a good portrait. My dad's died now. He died some years ago. And when we handed out the family stuff after my mum died, one of my brothers has got the portrait, and it's great, it's lovely. But I couldn't take it because I still have just a tiny memory of actually seeing my dad looking at me. I'm so sad about that. I just let it go. Without knowing what I was doing, I just assumed, which is, as the Americans say, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. I just assumed it was all, oh, you could do that, and I was still in that days when I believed that I should do what somebody told me to.
Mm. Beautiful story for me.